Welcome to the Pulling Each Other Along podcast, where we have the most wonderful guests in the world share their journeys of who and what pulled them along to their relative greatnesses in both business and life. Thanks for tuning in. The Pulling Each Other Along podcast starts right now. Hello again, this is Doug Cornfield with the Pulling Each Other Along podcast. And still in Utah, still getting the most amazing guests. And really, I just had her business partner the last time. I'll try to do this as almost like a connected series, doing them back to back. And Brooke is your business partner. You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
And when I say amazing, I was just in some mastermind where we just kind of discussed businesses. These two ladies gave some of the most incredible advice I've ever heard from young ladies in a short period of time. You obviously have done this before.
Thank you.
So it was I'm like, they're out of our league. What are we doing at this table is kind of how I felt. But so nice to meet you. And it's Casey or Cassie? Cassie.
Yeah.
And so Cassie, it's so nice to meet you and have you here on the Pulling Each Other Along podcast. But I know I just found out where you're from, but why don't you let people know where you're from? Give them your full name if you want, the name of the business, all those kind of things. But then I want a little hint of passion in your life right now.
All right. Sounds good.
Right.
Well, thanks for having me, Doug. Super
Yes.
excited to be here. So I'm Cassie Shea. I am third generation local to Santa Barbara, California.
Wow.
So I feel like I'm one of the luckiest girls alive,
they were
frankly.
digging gold back then.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I actually live off of a street called Hope Avenue.
Okay.
And my grandparents, my great-grandparents, all my great aunts and uncles are all buried on that street.
Wow.
So I really have deep roots in that
do,
clay,
yeah.
which is really special to me. So I'm the co-founder of Powerhouse Leaders HQ. And I grew up actually in the corporate world. So I climbed the corporate ladder pretty fast. And 3 years ago decided to go on my own pivot journey and became an entrepreneur, which was my dream. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of funny timing. I moved to London in February of 2020, right? February 2020, which was kind of ironic global timing. I did end up coming home right before they closed the borders. It's kind of an adventurous month, as it were. In terms of passions in my life outside of advising CEOs and doing things like this, where we get to mastermind and get really vulnerable about each other's businesses and how can we help each other and how can we grow. Two of my deep and abiding passions are karaoke, which I think is the best sport in the world.
Very good.
And
maybe we'll get you to sing something.
I did sing on another podcast today. It's unexpected, but sometimes you have to. And I would just say being out in nature. I feel very, very blessed and grateful to live in such a beautiful place. So we have the mountains, we have the beach. I love to go hiking. I love to go stand-up paddleboarding.
Nice.
Anything having to do with the ocean, I'm going to give it a go. Kayaking, swimming. Hopefully not seeing any sharks, but I love being in the water. I love being grounded in the mountains. So I feel very lucky.
Favorite singer, song, song group, music group?
Well, that's easy. It's the Beatles.
Yeah, Beatles.
Have you heard of them?
I don't know. They're before my time, so I'm not sure.
Right. Oh no, of course. But I would say, I would say my favorite singer though of all time, hands down. I got to see her live in person when I was 18 years old in Las Vegas. Is Celine Dion.
Okay.
I love Celine Dion.
I'm a Mercury fan. So
are you?
Oh,
okay.
Of course. His vocals are. Anybody wants to say he didn't have the best vocals in rock and roll, they're like, what? I can't even talk to that person.
Crazy little thing called love.
Crazy little thing called love. No doubt. So he's pretty talented. So singing, I actually had a background in singing a bit.
Should we do a duet?
We could. My voice is like worn out from talking, and maybe I have to do the lower notes instead of the higher notes. But it's haven't done karaoke all that often, but
I actually have a studio set up.
You have a studio?
I have a karaoke studio.
Fun. You are so fun.
So,
what's like one of your favorite songs to karaoke then?
Oh my gosh. Well, this is kind of, I feel like I need songs that aren't sad, but I'll tell you two of my favorite songs to do are Jolene by Dolly Parton. Okay. I'm just getting over a cold, so it's not going to sound that good. Okay. But I just love that song, and it makes me cry every time I sing it. Jolene. And then Jolene, 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 Jolene.
There you go.
Yeah, I wish I was Dolly Parton, but I'm not. But I'm about 5'2", so I'm like kind of right there,
Right there. There you go.
I don't know, Cassandra Land, Dolly Land, it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
And my signature karaoke song since I was 15 years old is I Will Survive.
Okay.
Which I feel like is also a good entrepreneurial ballad.
Everybody needs that song, or Keep Me Running,
Right?
Keep Me Going, Keep Moving. Any of the songs like
Just
that.
keep going.
Yeah,
I've got all my life to live. I've got all my love to give, and I'll survive.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a good message.
Until we don't.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
And then hopefully
It's good some stoicism too. Just like bring it back down. 3 words, you will die.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Thanks, Doug.
Well, one of my favorite movie series, and I was actually in the process of. I usually watch it about once a year, and you might not have. Is The Band of Brothers.
I haven't seen it.
And it's incredibly awesome, because it's more real life. Obviously, it's war, so it's not for everybody and those kind of things. But this is a rich generation, and there's a soldier that everybody just couldn't believe, that he could do what he could do, and he basically took the premise that I'm already dead, so I'm going to live every second that I can. Basically, I'm just going to do what I'm supposed to do, and so it at least hid something. He said we all fear, we're all scared.
Yeah.
If you're saying you're not scared when the bullets are flying, and we all have fears even as an entrepreneur or whatever, but we're all scared, but we all are, and we're all going to end someday, but we're going to make it. Let's make it happen. Let's not wait. Let's do stuff today. And I think that's that's been my entrepreneurial thing. I didn't want to wait until I retired to do something. Let's do it. Let's do it now. And if it doesn't work, and if it doesn't stick up again, if we throw something up against the wall and it doesn't stick, well, let's try something else. Let's pivot, as we say, and let's try something different. So, well, again, I've loved your wisdom and I loved your energy during the meetings that we had. But I'm gonna start with life for you. I went with business with Brooke. So when I ask these questions, it's pretty simple, but they're also direct. A time in your life could have been 5 years old. It could have been high school, middle school. Middle school is like one of those weird times for a lot of people. But what was an event where you got stuck, were fearful, in trouble, something bad happened, whatever it might be, but then something pulled you along that you can think of?
Gosh, how much time do we have?
I just want one good story. One good story.
All right, well, I'll just do the first one that comes to mind because that's always usually the best, right?
That's the best one. That's the one I'm looking for.
So I had this amazing boss when I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And...
You're not in your 20s?
No, but we could pretend.
Okay, we'll pretend.
And I had this really audacious goal at the time. So I'm a first generation college student, first person in my family to get a graduate degree. I got my master's in business administration. After that was a left or maybe a right turn after my bachelor's in English literature and theology and humanities. So I got my MBA and I really wanted to learn how to be a wealthy person.
Okay.
I come from a very blue collar family and I love that because it's always been about working super hard.
Right.
If you want something, you have to work super hard. Everyone in my family thinks I'm a little odd because most of my work now is in my brain. Like I get to think really hard and that's how I make money now.
Strategize, whatever.
But at the time when I was in my 20s, I was like, okay, I don't really know any wealthy people. And I want to change my destiny. I want to change what's possible for me. And the outcome wasn't the money. Brooke, my business partner, has a great phrase. Money doesn't fix feelings.
That's correct.
And that's a hard one to learn, right? You got to blow through a lot of money before you realize that.
Right.
But I really wanted to think like a wealthy person. And so at the time, I had this huge ambition of what I wanted to do with my life. And I had no traction. I was working an entry-level job in Venice Beach, California, which was a super fun place to be. And I realized that my boss was very wealthy.
Okay.
And it wasn't because he was ostentatious about it, but it turned out that his family had a multi-billion-dollar brand that they had a multi-billion-dollar exit on. He didn't see any of that money. He's all self-made. And I pulled him aside one day and I said, I know this is going to sound really weird, but you're the richest person I know. Would you please teach me to think like a rich person?
Wow.
And to this day, he's on my favorites contact list on my phone. After that experience, I went on to basically soak up all the knowledge from him. And he told me once, he's like, you know why I like mentoring you? And I said, no, other than that I'm persistent and I never let you go. Like I'm just like on it, asking questions. And he said, you actually want to get better and you're humble enough to take feedback, which was actually really hard for me, especially in my 20s, like such a know-it-all. Like life's beating that out of me at this point. Life's mostly beating that out of me.
All when we were 20.
Right? Like, don't we all?
No,
And then
I don't
it's
know
freeing
anything.
when you're like, oh gosh, I don't know anything. And every new day is a new day to learn, new day to meet new people. But he pulled me aside. He said, I really love teaching you because you're hungry to learn. And I went on to double my salary right after that job. A year later, I doubled my salary. Right after that, jumped up to the executive suite, was managing a $14 million P&L within less than 12 months of meeting him. And after that, I would make sure to set up, usually once a quarter. Now we see each other way more because we're better friends. But about once a quarter, I would set up like a really fancy dinner date. And it was my expression of stepping into that new identity. And no matter what happened in my life, or like what was up, what was down, as I was building my career, I made sure that every other time, basically, I was picking up the check for both of us.
Gotcha.
As a signal of, I have the capacity to earn more, do more, and be more.
Right.
And to this day, he's in my favorites contact on my phone. We hang out more than once a quarter now. He's really like that person that I call whenever life's major transitions happened. But he pulled me along because of who he was. And it wasn't that he was like reaching out to give me a handout, like, oh, you're this, sad kind of like ambitious person that doesn't make a lot of money. There was definitely this big power dynamic, but what he did was offer me knowledge. And so part of my journey moving forward, especially when I've managed teams and been in an experience where I get exposure to people who are early on in their career, is I really open up my story and I try to look for people who are also humble, willing to accept feedback, and hungry to learn. And I love talking to those people because I feel like I have something to share now too. And if it wasn't for him pulling me along on my journey, and it wasn't about superficial, like I just want to get rich. It was, I just wanted to create more options for my life.
Right, nice.
And I wanted abundance in my life, abundance of connections, abundance of opportunities. I never wanted to have to look for another job again.
Yes.
And I haven't. And so that was a really just awesome moment of finding a mentor who, just out of the goodness of his heart, was willing to share more of his knowledge and share more of his way of being and open me up to a whole new reality.
Right. So how did you pull him along?
Well, to this day, I'm one of the first people he calls when he has a business strategy question.
There you go.
So in some ways, the tables have not quite turned, but instead of being mentor-mentee, it's more like good friends and peers now.
Yeah.
And he's one of those people, when I have a big accomplishment or when I have something to share, he's like right there cheering me on. He's one of the first people I text.
Nice.
And same for him. And so he just called me up the other day. He's pitching some new clients in his business, and he asked me about pricing strategy. And so we just had this 5-minute conversation about pricing and pricing psychology. And it was great because I was like, wow, 7-8 years ago, I didn't know any of this.
Right.
So I think it's a fun expression when the people that you look up to, those mentors, they're also craving human connection. And as you grow and change, you have something to offer as well. I believe so strongly, like we have something to learn from everybody we meet.
No, there's no doubt there. And there's a couple of things that you said that just kind of really resonate with me with the Pulling Each Other Along show or podcast that we have, is that, yes, he pulled you along, but you also are not pulling him along. And that's really, that's really our heart. You can't just want to just be pulled along all the time.
Yeah.
You can't be that person's just taker. It's yes, there's times when we need help. But then when you can help, and even sometimes when you don't feel like you can help, you can pull somebody along, even when those times are really tough. And so I really love that you are now pulling him along, probably more than you know, because you're a pretty smart girl. And so it's pretty good to see your wisdom and your strategy. And then, Dave's not here. Dave Clark's not here. But if he was our co-host today, and he often is when we do our normal podcast setting, he wasn't blessed, after polio. He didn't have use of his legs. His left side of his body was really, really messed up from the polio. And one of the things that he always felt and was taught was that, he had to use his mind. And he had to strategize, where do I belong? If I'm playing baseball, what position do I play? Put me on shortstop with crutches? Not a good idea. Put me in center field? Probably not. So he had to figure out, strategize from a young age. And I also say, because he doesn't usually listen to podcasts unless he's on it, but it's an amazing mind And when you can use your mind, and even as entrepreneurs, oftentimes it's that thinking, it's that waking up in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden you've got this idea, and it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And then you might roll with it, and sometimes those are the absolute best strategies and ideas that we can come up with. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. You're using your mind, and that's helped you create wealth. Because I have a lot of people probably listen to the show, they want to create more wealth. What's a simple strategy or a point of advice that you could give? How do you use your mind to work for you?
Yeah, good question. So I do a couple things. Number one, I treat mindset like I'm going to the gym. And whenever I'm coaching people who want to make a change in their life, I ask them, like, how many minutes are you spending per day on your mindset? Because a lot of people have an answer when I ask them about fitness, or, hey, are you eating 3 meals a day? Or tell me about your sleep pattern.
Right.
And people are like, I thought I hired you for business strategy. I'm like, you did. But I need to know some of your biomechanics, because our minds are a product of our bodies well functioning. And so one of the first places that I work with people is actually understanding how healthy are your routines. And one of the routines that I practice, and I would recommend this for anybody who wants to just get a different result in their life, whether that's creating more wealth, creating a different set of relationships, is actually intentionally finding something that resonates with you, whether that's scripture reading, if you're religious, prayer, meditation, but find something that's actually going to cultivate a positive mindset for you. Another technique that I love to use is I preemptively journal as if the situation has happened.
Okay.
And so I write in great detail about these vacations that I haven't been on yet and houses that I haven't bought yet. And what's so fun is when I look back, almost every single thing I've written down over the years has come true.
Wow.
And so what it does is your brain actually doesn't know the difference between the mind movie you're playing and your reality. So if you actually implant a different story or mind movie, if you will, into your brain,
mind movie,
by writing the scene down,
okay,
you're going to look for ways to make that true.
Wow.
You're going to start seeing positive associations in your environment that you didn't see before. It's like, for example, if you think to yourself, what's your dream car?
It's a 1936 Cadillac, and I'm not a car guy.
Classy, okay.
But my daughter and her husband own a vintage car storage facility in the Finger Lakes of New York, and they restore vintage cars. That's what they do. And she's also an actress, and she's getting some things as well. But there's this one beautiful blue Cadillac. It's like a 1936.
So cool.
And it's so big.
What kind of blue?
It's in it wouldn't, I don't really mind the light blue or whatever,
okay,
but it's in that
nice.
light blue.
Yeah.
Not like, probably sky blue, but not quite sky blue. Maybe a little gray in there. But it's just such a beautiful car. So if what I've said if, and it's really an if when you're dealing with movie deals, because Dave Clark and I have a movie deal going with his story, and so when that camera is rolling and we've actually made real money from the movie deal,
yep.
I told my daughter and her husband, I said, hey, I want one of those cars.
So that's a perfect example. You've played out the movie in your mind of when that's going to happen, how it's going to happen, and the awareness of knowing what you wanted and seeing the context, seeing that picture in your mind has presented you in physical reality with a situation to actually attain what you want.
Right. And I'm not a car guy at all. But it's just a matter of that's been in their shop. It's somebody stored it there. It's this beautiful car. I'll probably get first a place on the beach where all my family can gather for vacations.
They might like that.
Yeah. So, but
because not everyone can probably fit in the car.
Right. And so, but no, not my family. Not when I have 7 kids and 5 grandkids now. So it's pretty crazy. But so those mind mapping, those mind playing out, and I've done a little bit more of that in this last year, and I'm under non-disclosure with one of my folks on his processes of how he does some of this stuff. But it is when we train our mind, when we dig into our mind, and I've had some neuro specialists and people that have healed themselves with their mind on my podcast, some amazing people. One of them was a national champion ballroom dancer.
So cool.
And he was, basically, they told him he had no hope. His doctors told him no hope. And he uses techniques now to create more adrenaline and more things that our body needs to heal itself.
Amazing.
amazing people. And so I get to meet people like that and you on these podcasts, and I'm like, wow, I get to learn from these people. This is great. So that is super, super important to be able to use your mind. And obviously you have a great one. I saw it literally in real time and very quick.
Thank you.
It's just didn't even have to think about stuff. She could analyze so quickly. So you're obviously practicing this in your life, your business, the clients that you work with, which are typically CEOs. That's who you work with. So if you have any CEOs that are in transition, you should reach out to these people, Brooke and Cassie, because you are going to not be disappointed. Now, you work with just women, men, both? So
work with both.
Okay.
So the idea when a CEO comes into our world is that they're in some kind of pivot window. They're ready to make an exit in their company, and they're not sure necessarily what do they want to do next.
Right.
And so the deeper question, even, it's actually really difficult to answer the question, what do you want?
Right.
And the deeper question, and Brooke's so good at that. She's really good. She has a whole framework for helping people really discern what is it that you actually want and making sure that you'd be happy if you got it.
Right.
Because sometimes we want stuff, we get it, we're like, no, I'm not actually very happy.
Right.
That's me every time I eat ice cream. I'm never happy, actually.
Oh, I am.
Should just not eat ice cream.
New York. We have the greatest ice cream in the world. It's homemade. It's the way it used to be made.
All right.
It's amazing.
That's a date.
I was just talking with the owner. He's a friend of mine. My son actually works there. He's a senior in high school. It's Dippity Doodas. I'll give him a little shout out.
Okay.
People literally get ice cream at this place. They walk out on our little Market Street in Corning, and they come out, and often that was the best ice cream I've ever had in my life.
Okay.
Just awesome.
I'll try it before I write off ice cream.
Don't write off ice cream. But you want to still do ice cream probably in moderation, and depending on how your body deals with all that stuff. So I'm going to get one more thing out of you before we close out, because I feel like you are a wealth of knowledge and advice. What would be one thing that you would just in life give advice to our pulling each other along listener?
I'm a very, very, very high achiever. My mom says that's not even the right term. She's like, you're like not even an overachiever. It's something totally different. And what I've noticed a lot is that when people appear to be high achievers or overachievers like myself, sometimes people kind of keep us at an arm's distance because we seem to present that we have everything figured out. And in my life, I've had quite a few opportunities. Honestly, we could have talked for 8 hours about people that have pulled me along. And I always try to pay it forward and make sure I'm pulling someone else along. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I would just say when you're looking around at your life, sometimes the people who seem to be the most capable are in the deepest need for emotional connection. And that's part of my mission in terms of Powerhouse Leaders HQ and my company that I have with Brooke, is that people who ascend to high heights in our societies, who have peak experiences, are craving connection. And so when we're looking at our world, especially post-COVID, I would just say when you're looking, thinking to yourself, how can I pull someone else along? Maybe I don't know enough. Maybe I'm not, at this level, whatever kind of barriers we perceive in our mind that keep us distant from each other. I would just say that the biggest blessing and benefit you could ever give to somebody else is just the gift of human connection, and really sitting down, listening to someone else's story, taking a minute to really get to know somebody else. And I feel like that helps melt away our differences. It helps us find that common ground. And so my advice, actually, I think the thing that's been the X factor in my career when you mentioned about being in masterminds is I just try to practice really deep listening. As much as I love to talk and sing karaoke, I feel like the greatest gift I could give anyone is being a deep listener. And I try to cultivate that practice very rigorously with a lot of discipline. I've taken classes on it. I've read books on it.
Wow.
And I sit with people who I don't agree with, and I listen to them. I hear them out. I feel like that's part of my gift of pulling others along, is being a really deep listener, because I think that cultivates a lot of peace in our society that we might not have at scale.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And thanks for listening to the Pulling Each Other Along podcast.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Pulling Each Other Along podcast. If you were inspired today, please share this episode and let us know in the comments section. Don't forget to thank and let those great people in your life know how they pulled you along.